The 12-year-old letter in the attic warned of a fire that never came on a cold November morning in 2019 in the quiet village of Harrowbrook in Lincolnshire. A property developer named Christopher Bale climbed into the attic of number 7 Church Lane. He had purchased the Victorian terrace house at auction 3 weeks earlier, intending to renovate and resell. The attic was filled with the detritus of decades: old newspapers, collapsed cardboard boxes, a broken rocking horse, and stacks of water-stained books. It was while sorting through a wooden trunk in the far corner, beneath a moth-eaten christening gown, that Bale discovered a letter. It was dated 14th March 2007, 12 years before his purchase, and it was addressed to the occupant of the house. Its contents would later baffle detectives and rekindle an investigation that had lain dormant for nearly a decade. Number 7 Church Lane had been home to the Pemberton family for over 40 years. Thomas Pemberton, a retired railway signalman, lived there with his wife Margaret until her death in 2005. After Margaret passed, Thomas remained in the house alone, becoming increasingly reclusive according to neighbors. He was 73 years old in 2007, a thin man with silver hair and a pronounced stoop, often seen walking to the corner shop with a canvas bag. The Pembertons had 2 children, a daughter, Catherine, who had moved to Edinburgh in the 1990s, and a son, David, who had died in a road traffic accident in 1994. Thomas Pemberton died on 9th February 2010. He was found by his daughter Catherine, who had come to check on him after he failed to answer telephone calls for 3 days. The death was recorded as natural causes, heart failure, and Thomas Pemberton was buried beside his wife in the churchyard of St. Guthlax, 300 yards from his home. The letter discovered in the attic was written in blue ink on lined paper, the handwriting steady but cramped. It read, "To the one who sleeps beneath the roof of 7 Church Lane, the fire will come on the night of the black moon. 3 will burn. The letter in the attic will be found. This is the only warning you will receive." It was unsigned. The envelope bore no postmark, no stamp, no address. It had been sealed and placed in the trunk, never sent. When Christopher Bale read those words, he felt, as he later described to police, a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Harrowbrook is a village of approximately 2,000 residents, situated 5 miles east of Lincoln. In 2007, it was the kind of place where neighbors still knew each other's business, where the pub on the high street hosted a weekly quiz night, and where the arrival of a stranger was noteworthy. The population was predominantly older, many families having lived there for generations. The houses along Church Lane were attached Victorian terraces, their facades of red brick softened by decades of lichen and ivy. Number 7 stood out only slightly. Its front door was painted an unusual shade of deep green, unlike the black or brown doors of its neighbors. The question that immediately presented itself was simple yet profound. Who wrote the letter, and how did they know what would happen? For in 2019, when Bale discovered the letter, something had indeed occurred at number 7 Church Lane. In October 2018, 15 months before the letter was found, a fire had broken out in the house. It was not, however, a fire that killed 3 people. The house had been empty at the time. The Pemberton house had remained vacant following Thomas Pemberton's death in 2010. Catherine, his sole surviving child, inherited the property but chose not to live in it. She rented it briefly to a series of tenants, none of whom stayed longer than 6 months. In 2015, she listed it for sale, but it remained on the market for 3 years without attracting a buyer. By 2018, the house was in a state of neglect. The garden had overgrown, the gutters had blocked, and rainwater had begun to seep through the ceiling of the upstairs bedroom. It was in this condition, abandoned and deteriorating, that number 7 caught fire on the evening of 17th October 2018. The fire was reported at 7:42 p.m. by a neighbor, Sandra Huggins, who lived at number 9. She told investigators she had seen orange light flickering through the upper windows and smelled smoke while hanging washing in her back garden. Fire crews from Lincoln arrived within 20 minutes and contained the blaze within an hour, but the house was extensively damaged. The roof collapsed, the interior walls were blackened, and the upper floors were rendered structurally unsound. Importantly, the fire had originated in the kitchen, at the rear of the ground floor, and investigators quickly determined it was accidental. A faulty electrical socket, they concluded, had overheated and ignited nearby curtains. There were no casualties. The house was empty. No one was injured. Yet the letter referenced a fire on the night of the Black Moon. In October 2018, there was a full moon on the 24th, not the 17th, and there was no black moon that month, a term sometimes used to describe a month with no full moon or a second full moon in a calendar month. October 2018 had only one full moon. The phrase, detectives would later note, did not correspond to any astronomical event in 2018. It was, however, consistent with an unusual celestial alignment that had occurred in March 2007. In March 2007, the full moon fell on the 3rd, and there was indeed a second full moon on the 31st, a blue moon, not a black moon. But the lunar cycle that month was unusual, and some sky watchers had referred to it as a black moon due to the way the shadows fell in the northern hemisphere. The connection was tenuous, but it was there. Catherine Pemberton was contacted by Lincolnshire Police in December 2019 after Bale turned the letter over to authorities. She was 57 years old, a retired civil servant living in a flat in Edinburgh. When shown a photograph of the letter, she told detectives she had never seen it before and had no idea who might have written it. She described her father as a private man, particularly in his later years, but said he had never mentioned receiving threats or unusual correspondence. She confirmed that she had not visited the house in the months before the fire in 2018 and had no knowledge of anyone who might have wanted to harm the property. The investigation that followed was methodical but inconclusive. Detectives interviewed 37 residents of Harrowbrook, some of whom had known the Pembertons for decades. They examined records from the post office, looking for any correspondence sent to number 7 in 2007 that might have gone unrecorded. They searched for similar letters, either sent to other addresses in the village or discovered in other properties. They found nothing. There was no record of anyone in Harrowbrook receiving anonymous warnings, no reports of suspicious persons in the area, and no evidence of any threat made against the Pemberton family. And yet the letter existed. It had been written in 2007, sealed and placed in an attic trunk where it remained for 12 years. It referenced a fire that would occur more than a decade later. It predicted, or perhaps commanded, that the letter would be found. And it warned of 3 who would burn, though the 2018 fire injured no one. Detective Inspector Rachel Vance, who led the investigation, spoke to the BBC in 2020. She said, "We have examined every possible avenue. We have tested the paper and ink, but they are common household items, unavailable forensically. The handwriting has been analyzed by experts, but it does not match any known samples, not Thomas Pemberton, not his wife, not any member of the family we have been able to trace. We cannot rule out the possibility that this is an elaborate hoax, a coincidence, or something else entirely. But the letter was in that attic before the fire occurred. That much is certain." What became clear during the investigation was that Thomas Pemberton had, in the final years of his life, become increasingly anxious about the house. Neighbors recalled that he had installed additional locks on the doors and windows, and that he had asked a local builder to reinforce the attic hatch. He had also, according to one neighbor, begun sleeping in the ground floor living room rather than his bedroom upstairs. When asked why, he had replied only that he preferred to be near the door. Catherine confirmed that her father had changed in the years after her mother's death, becoming more secretive and nervous. She had attributed it to grief and advancing age. There is one further detail that investigators have been unable to explain. In the spring of 2007, a woman named Brenda Whitmore, who lived 2 doors down from number 7, reported seeing a figure standing in the Pemberton garden late at night. She described the figure as tall and motionless, standing beneath the bedroom window for several minutes before walking away. She saw this on 3 separate occasions throughout March 2007. When she mentioned it to Thomas Pemberton the following day, he told her she had been mistaken, there had been no one in his garden. He did not appear alarmed. He simply denied it. Brenda Whitmore moved to Cornwall in 2009 and was never interviewed by police until 2020. She stood by her account. The house at number 7 Church Lane was demolished in 2021. The site was cleared and sold to a developer who built 2 semi-detached properties in its place. The new houses were completed in 2023, and their owners, a young couple from Nottingham, live there now. They are unaware of the letter, the fire, or the history of the land beneath their feet. Catherine Pemberton has declined further comment. Christopher Bale, the developer who found the letter, sold the house to the company that ultimately demolished it. He keeps a photograph of the letter on his phone. He looks at it sometimes, late at night, and wonders who wrote it and why. The letter in the attic was found exactly where it said it would be found. It was discovered 12 years after it was written, on a cold November morning, by a man who had no reason to suspect its existence. The fire that was predicted in its pages did occur, though not on the night of the black moon, and not with the consequences it warned of. 3 did not burn. No one was injured. The house was merely destroyed. But the question that remains, the question that has haunted investigators and neighbors alike, is not who wrote the letter. It is not how they knew or what they intended. The question that lingers, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable, is simpler and more unsettling. If the letter was placed in that attic in 2007, 12 years before it was found, who was it warning? And was the fire in 2018 the fire that was meant to come, or merely the one